The UConn Huskies lost their first game of the season on the mainland, falling at Villanova in a game that just might save Kyle Neptune's job.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Thursday, and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host for today, Andy Patton, and you are joining at the place to get your college basketball content Monday through Friday, 52 weeks out of the year. I want to give a special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord channel, and remind you all that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Well, we got 8 games from Wednesday's very good slate. To recap today, we're going to talk about some epic comebacks, some big-time conference matchups. We're going to start with this loss by UConn. We're also going to close out the show previewing 6 games taking place on Thursday, 3 of them in the Big Ten, 3 others for folks to keep an eye on as well. We're starting in Philadelphia, where Villanova upsets the 9th-ranked Huskies of UConn 68-66. True home game for Villanova, and in fact, that is a rarity. The last time UConn played Villanova on Villanova's campus was back in January of 1995. Typically, this game gets played at the home of the Philadelphia 76ers, and I think once it was played on Villanova's campus, but there was no crowd, there was no students. So this is the first time they've played there with the students, with the full environment, and UConn takes a loss. Huge win for Villanova, not just for their NCAA tournament hopes, but for Coach Kyle Neptune's job security, as he has been considered on a flaming hot seat throughout the majority of the season. But this team, after starting the year 3-4, they are now 8-1 in their last 9 contests. That includes some big time wins. They beat Cincinnati. They beat Butler. They have some other nice wins. They do their losses. The St. Joe's loss definitely stands out. Losses to Creighton and Maryland certainly could be worse, although both those teams have taken losses of their own recently. Eric Dixon, as he has been throughout the season, was the star for Nova in this one. 23 points, 18 of them coming in the second half. Not a particularly efficient night, 6 of 20, but he did have 9 free throws in this game. Wooga Poplar also had a nice game for him. 18 points, 6 of 10 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3, hit a clutch 3 with about 5 minutes to go that gave Villanova a lead. It broke a tie, gave them a lead. They ended up hanging on, picking up a W here. Of course, for UConn, the big storyline for them has been the loss of star freshman Liam McNeely, starting small forward, really integral part of this Danny Hurley-led team. And while McNeely's absence was obviously felt and was a part of this team's loss to Villanova, it certainly wasn't the fault of his replacement, sophomore Jalen Stewart, who stepped into the starting lineup, played 32 minutes in McNeely's absence, and was one of the better players for UConn in this game. 14 points, 3 boards, a pair of assists, and a pair of blocks. He was 6 of 9 shooting in this one, 2 of 5 from 3, second on the team in scoring behind Solo Ball, who had 16. The main conversation, we're not overly concerned about a tough road loss for UConn going forward, especially without one of their starters. But the main question for Villanova, what does this mean for them from an NCAA tournament perspective? They're 1-2 in quad 1 games, this being their one quad 1 victory, much needed one for them. They're 2-1 in quad 2 games. So they have opportunities. They have, you want more than one quad 1 win, obviously, but they have plenty of opportunities to pick them up. In fact, 6 remaining quad 1 games on their schedule as it's currently constructed, as well as 6 quad 2 games. So 12 opportunities to pick up quad 1, quad 2 wins. Not saying it's going to happen, but certainly Villanova puts themselves in a position where if they are in that bubble conversation, a win over UConn definitely could push them on the right side of the bubble and likely makes it less likely that Kyle Neptune will get let go if he does lead this team into the big dance. Another result out of the Big East to talk about here. Seton Hall erases a 19-point deficit to beat DePaul in overtime, 85-80. the final score, the first win in the Big East this season for Shaheen Holloway and the Pirates. They were down 15.5, like we said, down as many as 19, came all the way back, thanks in large part to a Herculean effort from a pair of Pirates, Dylan Adewusu and Isaiah Coleman. Each had 24 points. Adewusu had 7 assists, 3 steals, was 5 of 9 from 3. Coleman, 6 boards, 5 assists, 4 of 7 from 3. Those two guys combined 9 of 16 from 3. Seton Hall as a team, 11 of 22. Really, really nice offensive performance from Shaheen Holloway's team. Typically not the case for them. Yes, it was overtime, but 85 points is not something we've seen from this Pirates team very often this year. Yes, it's DePaul. Yes, DePaul. While we're excited about them and we're excited about Chris Holtmann and what they're bringing and kind of the rebuild that's going on there, it's still not a team that it's not exactly the most impressive win you can pick up in the Big East. Let's put it that way, but still claps for Shaheen Holloway and Seton Hall for getting this one done, especially when going down by almost 20 in this one. CJ Gunn leads the way for the Blue Demons, 21 points, 5 of 9 from 3 for him. Couple Big Ten results here to close out this segment before we talk about a wild result in the Big 12 and then 3 SEC games to close out our Wednesday recaps. We got Illinois here in the Big Ten crushing Penn State, 91-52 the final in this one, and it was thanks to a dominant performance on the glass for the Illini, the 13th ranked team in the country. A nearly hard to fathom 57-32 advantage on the glass. That's the kind of thing, like, we would be surprised to see that rebounding advantage against a MEAC school or an SWAC school. Like, that's a kind of rebounding advantage you don't see D1 to D1, never mind Big Ten to Big Ten opponent. Just a dominant physical performance from the Illini. 77 field goal attempts for them compared to just 65 for Penn State. I say just, that's still a crazy amount of shot attempts for both these two teams. The Nittany Lions, who are now 12-4, 2-3 in Big Ten. They only took 12 three-point attempts. They only made 2. 2 3-pointers made by the Nittany Lions compared to 10 made for Illinois on 31 attempts. Illinois moves to 4-1 in conference play, 12-3 overall. Real chance they end up in the top 10 starting next week in the AP poll. Morez Johnson off the bench for Brad Underwood's club, 20 points, 11 rebounds on a very efficient 9 of 11 shooting. Should mention that Illinois wins this game without Kasparis Jakusionis, their star freshman wing. He wasn't in the action for them, but Will Riley had a nice game. Timoslav Ivasic had a nice game. And of course, as we mentioned, Morez Johnson. Trey White, 20-7 for him as well. Next up in the Big Ten, the final game from that conference that we're going to talk about on today's show. Indiana pulls away. Wasn't super pretty. It rarely is with Mike Woodson's Hoosiers, but they are now 4-1 in the Big Ten after beating USC, Eric Musselman's Trojans. 82-69 the final there. The teams were tied at 38 at halftime, but Indiana outscored USC 44-31 in the second half. Hoosiers got this win despite shooting a pretty ugly 6 of 21 from 3. It's just under 29%. However, USC, who has been horrendous as a three-point shooting team this year, they shoot 6 of 26, just about 23% for them. And Indiana cleans up on the glass, one of the big issues for USC. They have a lot of size in the backcourt, a lot of length in their guards, but they just don't have a ton of physicality in the front court. And that's not a good recipe for success when you're trying to beat Umar Ballo in particular. And he was a tank for the Hoosiers in this one. 23 points, 8 boards, 9 of 11 shooting, even went a perfect 5 of 5 from the free throw line to boot. What a great performance from him. If you told me that Indiana was going to shoot 29% from 3 and that Mackenzie Mbako was literally not going to score 0 points on 0 of 8 shooting, probably wouldn't have guessed that they would get a W. If you told me they were playing USC, I might have thought, okay, maybe they'll still find a way to pull it off. And that was the case here. Got to give a shout out Miles Rice, 19 points, 9 boards, 6 assists for him. On the other side, Wesley Yates, redshirt freshman who sat out last year at UW with a foot injury. He led the Trojans with 18 points, had 3 assists to boot as well. Well, we talked about a wild result in the Big 12. Kansas looked like they might lose another home game to an unranked team in conference play. Then the defense did something nearly unbelievable at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. We're going to talk about that as well as 3 results coming out of the SEC on Wednesday. All that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Because that's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's kind of like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 per year when using all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast. We're still recapping all the epic action from Wednesday evening across the college basketball space. We mentioned some epic comebacks. We talked Seton Hall doing so. Now we're going to talk about kind of the opposite. It was a bit of a comeback for Kansas, but really it was just an absolute throttling of Arizona State in the second half. The Bobby Hurley, not a good day for the Hurley family. Hopefully they can kind of console each other here as Danny's team falls to Villanova. Meanwhile, Arizona State goes to Fog Allen Fieldhouse, goes into halftime with a 42-36 lead. You got to be feeling pretty good. Up 6 against one of the top 10 teams in the country in Kansas. I know they're ranked 11th, so borderline top 10 team. It's going to be tough to maintain that lead in the second half at the Fog, but wow. It's kind of like Arizona State just forgot to bring their basketball game out from halftime. Kansas opens up the second half with a 20-3 run, and it really didn't get better for Arizona State outside of that. Eventually, the final score rolls in. Kansas wins 74-55, meaning that Arizona State in the second half of this game, after scoring 42 in the first half, the Sun Devils managed just 13 in the second half. A completely anemic offensive performance from Bobby Hurley's team. Dominant defensive stuff from Bill Self and the Jayhawks. They moved to 11-3 overall, 2-1 in the Big Ten, avoid what would have been a ugly 1-2 start for them. Meanwhile, speaking of 1-2 starts, that's where Arizona State finds themselves 3 games into their first Big 12 season. Life comes at you fast. In the Big 12, you carry a 6-point lead against every team in the Pac-12. I don't think that you're going to get beat by 19 in the game, but that's what happens here for this Sun Devils team. They're 10-4 on the year. Jayhawks 13 of 13 from the line, had a 10 rebound advantage, 39-29. They also had 13 steals, part of 18 turnovers committed by the Sun Devils. Zeke Mayo leads the way for Kansas, 23 points, 5 boards, 5 of 8 from the three-point line. Arizona State shoots just under 36% from the field. Alston Mason had 19 points, 6 of 10 shooting for him. He also had 6 turnovers. And Arizona State's bench combined for just 2 points, 0 of 4 shooting. Those 2 points coming both at the charity stripe. 3 more games to talk about, all coming out of the best conference in college basketball this season, the SEC. First one, incredibly exciting, epic game for the Aggies of Texas A&M, the 10th ranked team in the country. On the road at Oklahoma, 17th ranked team in the country, Texas A&M comes back to secure an 80-78 win, a heartbreaking loss for Porter Moser and the Sooners, who are already kind of off to the same start we saw from them last year. They were in the Big 12, but they did the same thing, won all their games or most of their games in the non-conference. Had a middling performance in conference play, ultimately ended up missing at the tournament. We'll see if that happens again to this Oklahoma team. They are now 13-2 on the year, 0-2 in conference play. And look, they had an 18-point lead in the second half against a Texas A&M team that was missing their best player in Wade Taylor IV. They should have closed out this game. They were unable to do so, thanks in large part to Zurich Phelps. Incredible performance for him, kind of stepping into that lead role for Buzz Williams' club. He finishes with a career-high 34 points. That includes hitting the go-ahead 3 with 19 seconds left to put this game on ice for the Aggies, who are now 13-2 on the year, 2-0 in conference play, and again, picking up a win over a top 20 team on the road without their best player in Wade Taylor. Big shout out to Bryson Gooding, transfer for Oklahoma, who'd never scored more than 12 points up to this point in a game in his Oklahoma career. And he goes out and drops 34 off the bench for Porter Moser's team, 27 minutes for him. Really, really great performance on a day where the Sooners shot 14 of 24 from 3. That's 58%. Again, This is a hard to fathom loss. You had an 18-point lead. You're playing a team without their best player. You shot 58% from three. This just should not have been a loss for Oklahoma. I'm sure Porter Moser is going to have a hard time sleeping, figuring out what the heck happened in that one. I can tell you one thing, 18 turnovers, 13 steals by Texas A&M. That is certainly one of, if not the biggest contributing factor to this loss here for this Oklahoma club. Two more SEC games here as Alabama, the fifth-ranked team in the country, cruises past South Carolina, 88-68 in a road win for Nate Oates' team. South Carolina looking like the worst team in the conference right now. They're not even that bad of a team. It's just somebody has to be the worst team in the SEC, and that looks like it's falling on Lamont Paris and the Gamecocks. Mark Sears, phenomenal game for him, 22.6 assists, 7 of 12 from the field, including 4 of 6 from downtown. Colin Murray Boyles did a lot of things well for the Gamecocks in this one, except score in the basketball, 6 points on 1 of 6 shooting. He did have 8 boards, 3 assists, and 2 steals. But in a game where every other starter scored in double figures, where I'm sure there was a whole bunch of scouts in action watching, Murray Boyles didn't exactly live up to that billing as a potential lottery pick in the 2025 NBA draft. And we mentioned the other scorers all in other starters, all in double figures for South Carolina, but the bench 4 total points does not get it done. Bama now won 7 in a row with their last loss coming in the Players Era Festival to Oregon. Last result here to talk about out of the SEC, Ole Miss, 23rd ranked Rebels go to Arkansas, to Fayetteville to take on John Calipari and the Hogs, pick up a 73-66 win. Chris Beard over John Calipari. The Rebels now 2-0 in conference play and 13-2 overall. Meanwhile, Arkansas falls to 11-4 and is now 0-2 to start conference play. Tough one for John Calipari and the Hogs. Malik Dia, great game for the Rebels. 21 points, 8 boards, 7 of 12 shooting, and included making 2 of his 4 3-point attempts. Really good overall shooting night for Ole Miss, 9 of 23 from the 3-point line. That's about 39%. Meanwhile, Arkansas, 37% from the field, 22% from the 3-point line, 5 of 23. And folks, that was with John L. Davis coming off the bench to knock down 3 out of 7 from 3. That means the rest of the team, everybody not named Nellie Davis, just 2 of 16 combined from 3. That includes a horrific shooting night from Boogie Fland, starting to make a name for himself this year as a potential first round, potential top 10 even pick in the NBA draft. He goes out 1 of 8 from 3 in this one. DJ Wagner, 0 of 5. Those two guys did not get it done for John Calipari and this Arkansas team. Again, they are now 0-2 to start his not his first season in the SEC, of course, but his first season in the SEC as the head coach at Arkansas has yet to pick up a W. It's not going to get easier in this conference. Tons and tons of great teams. Meanwhile, Chris Beard avoids what would have been kind of a trap game. There's not a lot of bad losses you can take on the road in the SEC, but nice for them to be able to pick up a win on the road against a very good Arkansas team in a hostile environment. That's the kind of win that's going to help this Ole Miss team stay in the top 25 and get themselves a quality seed by the time March rolls around. Well, folks, we're closing out the show with 6 games on Thursday to preview, including 3 in the Big Ten. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Every single day, you got at least one Big Ten game. We got 3 of them to talk about coming up in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast, moving away from recapping a lot of great games, a lot of big comebacks, a lot of excitement on Wednesday across the college basketball landscape to instead look ahead to Thursday. Typically Thursdays, January, February, tend to be some of the slower days in the college basketball calendar. We haven't seen a lot of the high major conferences schedule a bunch of games on Thursdays. It tends to be when you get a little bit of a break. But the Big Ten, with their ridiculous amount of teams in conference play, have kind of helped us out, putting some good games out on Thursdays. We also got some fun West Coast games taking place on Thursday evening as well. We got all 6 of them here. We're going to go through them in chronological order. First up, Oregon, the 15th ranked Ducks. Dana Altman's club going out to Columbus to take on Ohio State, the Buckeyes. This game is at 6 Eastern time on the Big Ten Network. FanDuel currently favors Ohio State by 1.5. Both teams are 2-2 in conference play, looking to get over 500 as the Big Ten slate rolls on. Some fun matchups in this one. Bruce Thornton versus Jackson Shellstad in the backcourt for these two teams. Dana Altman and the Ducks have historically under Coach Altman performed very well in January. Can that continue? No longer in the Pac-12, no longer just taking trips to California, a couple trips up to Washington, Arizona. Now you got trips across the country, halfway across the country, at least for this matchup against Ohio State. Going to be a little bit trickier to keep up that success that they've had throughout the month of January. Big storyline for them. Nate Biddle been playing very well in the front court, a dynamic offensive player and rebounder. Ohio State have not quite had the same success in their front court with Aaron Bradshaw being out for a while and just not acclimating as well. Sean Stewart not acclimating as well. So a big question for Ohio State. How do they handle Nate Biddle? Can they score enough on this Oregon team with Biddle, as well as Supreme Cook, as well as KJ Evans in that front court? I think that's going to be the big storyline outside, of course, of that fun Thornton versus Shellstad matchup in the backcourt. Next up in our Big Ten wraparound on Thursday, Purdue, 20th ranked Boilermakers going on the road to Rutgers to take on the Scarlet Knights in that pair of superstar freshmen in Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. This game also at 6 Eastern time. It'll be on FS1. As I'm recording right now, there's not a FanDuel line. I am guessing that is because there's not an update on whether Dylan Harper, who's been out with an illness, will play for Rutgers. At least as I'm recording right now, by the time you're listening, we might know if he's going to be in the mix. Hope so. Then you get Harper and Bailey, Ace Bailey against Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith. I know it's not exactly the matchups, but that's kind of the excitement in this game is those two junior guards for Purdue who've been with this program for a while, who helped get them to national championship appearance. Like, these are really, really talented players for Matt Painter. Team hasn't quite had the same luster without Zach Edey as we thought that they might. Trey Kaufman-Renn has been fantastic, but this team struggles to rebound the basketball. Rutgers, meanwhile, is really, 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 really dominant with those two freshmen, like reliant, on those two freshmen. Rest of the team hasn't really stepped up in a major way. Rutgers kind of go in the way of some of the other teams we've seen in history who have uncharacteristically elite recruiting classes when they're not typically successful recruiting programs. And it doesn't look like it's going all that well. We've seen it with, Ben Simmons landing at LSU, with Markelle Fultz landing at Washington, those Dave Rose-led UNLV teams of yesteryear. Like, when teams unexpectedly get an influx of freshman talent, that doesn't often result in success in the NCAA tournament or even making the NCAA tournament. Rutgers looks like they might be going that direction, unfortunately. I'll tell you what, one really easy way to get yourself back in the NCAA tournament picture, beat a team that went to the national championship last year. We'll see if they can pull that off against against Painter and Purdue on Thursday. Last Big Ten game before we got a few more West Coast ones. This game features the West Coast team, although it's taking place in East Lansing, Michigan, as the Washington Huskies go on the road. Danny Sprinkle's club taking on Michigan State, the 16th ranked Spartans, 8 Eastern time on the Big Ten Network. FanDuel currently favors Tom Izzo's club by 13.5 points, and UW picked up a nice win over Maryland. Now, that was a home game for UW, but still a big win for them. But again, something different about winning at your home place against a team that traveled 3,000 miles versus going to East Lansing and beating Tom Izzo. That is not an easy thing to do. The Huskies 1-3 in Big Ten play right now, looking to avoid going 1-4. Going to have a hard time doing so. Great Osobor has not played great, pun intended there, so far this season for Danny Sprinkle and those Huskies. Going to have a tough matchup against a tough physical Michigan State team, as they so often are under Tom Izzo. The Spartans 3-0 start in conference play, looking to bring that up to 4-0. Three more mid-major games to talk about here, all out on the West Coast. In the WAC, Grand Canyon Bryce Drew's club on the road at Utah Valley, 8 Eastern time on ESPN+. FanDuel favors the Lopes by 3.5. Grand Canyon not doing what we thought they would do. It felt like this was an easy year for them to be one of the best mid-major teams in the country. They earned a 12 seed last year. They won a first-round game against St. Mary's. Had every opportunity to beat Alabama in the second round, were unable to do it. Tyon Grant Foster returns. They land high-profile players in the transfer portal like Jacoby Coles and Dennis Evans, and yet here we are, GCU 11-4 overall. Sure, they're 1-0 in WAC play, but they're probably going to win the WAC. But if they do, they're probably not going to be as much of a darling in the NCAA tournament as they were last year. Utah Valley, meanwhile, continues to be a successful program, 9-6, also starting conference play 1-0. Next up, a game in the WCC as Wayne Tinkle and the Oregon State Beavers go on the road to take on Herb Sendek and Santa Clara, 10 Eastern time on ESPN+. FanDuel favors the home team, the Broncos, by 4.5. The Beavers having a good year. haven't had a good year in a while under Wayne Tinkle, really since that Elite Eight run out of nowhere in 2021. But this year started off strong, picked up some nice wins, really close to picking up a big win over Oregon. And then they start out conference play, pick up a few wins, and then go on the road at LMU, who hasn't been playing very well, and they get spanked. 21-point loss to LMU. Now they're going back on the road. They're taking on a Santa Clara team that is better than LMU, although they have also not exceeded expectations. In fact, Santa Clara only beat San Diego, who's just outside the top 300 at KenPom. They only beat them by 1 in their most recent game. So Oregon State looking to rebound from that loss. Santa Clara looking to rebound from a near loss to a very bad team. Both these teams desperately needing a win. This should be some high-level, entertaining basketball to take in on the Thursday evening. Again, 10 Eastern start. So if you're out east, you got something to watch all the way into Friday morning. Should be a good one. And then last but not least, out of the Big West Conference, UC Irvine on the road at CSUN, Cal State Northridge, 10 Eastern time, ESPN Plus, FanDuel favoring the Anteaters by 4.5. They're 13-2 overall this season, 3-0 in the Big West. Meanwhile, CSUN, typically not a powerhouse program in the Big West, yet they are 11-4 and are off to a strong 3-1 start in conference play as well. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Want to thank all of you for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Remind you all to check out the show on YouTube. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts. And get ready on Saturday, Locked On College Basketball Game Night. This will be the second Saturday that we do this show. Leaf to Lean, our regular guest, he was on the show yesterday with Isaac. He is going to host this Saturday night show, all of the great action on Saturday, tons and tons and tons of fun games this weekend. He's going to recap all of them for you all on Saturday evening. Check that show out again. It'll be in your feed wherever you find this show, whether it's on Spotify, Apple, etc. You're going to find that show. It's fantastic. Definitely check it out. Thanks again for listening, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Gave him a shout out earlier in the show. Let's go Wild Popes. And until Friday, peace out.